Have you ever come home thinking everything was fine, only to find a truth that shatters your heart? Tonight's story will take you on a journey through guilt, love, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a family from the ashes of regret. It's one of those heartwarming stories that remind us that the greatest wealth isn't in our bank accounts, but in the people who wait for us at home. Before we continue, let me wish you peace and health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The night Nathan Cole came home to his silent mansion, success had never felt so hollow. The automatic lights blinked to life as his black SUV rolled into the driveway, cutting through the chill of late October air. Beyond the glass walls of the house, everything looked perfect, too perfect, like a showroom where no one really lived. He stepped inside, and the faint scent of polished marble and pine cleaner greeted him instead of warmth. The echo of his own footsteps was louder than he remembered. There had been a time when laughter bounced off those same walls, when his wife's voice could be heard humming softly from the kitchen. Now, there was only the hum of the central heating system and the whisper of wind slipping through the cracks. Vanessa appeared at the end of the hallway, her smile sharp and practiced. "You're home late," she said, her tone sweet but hollow. "Board meeting ran long," he answered, removing his coat. "Where's Eli?" She walked toward him in her silk robe, carrying a glass of red wine. "He went to bed early. Rough day, you know how kids can be." Nathan nodded absently, though something about her answer didn't sit right. He loosened his tie, moving toward the dining room. A soft jazz tune played from the hidden speakers, Vanessa's taste, not his. The table was set for two, but only one plate had been touched. Eli's chair sat empty, the napkin folded neatly in place. "He didn't eat dinner?" Vanessa sighed, her eyes rolling slightly. "He was being difficult again. Said the food was cold. I told him to stop complaining or he could wait until breakfast." Her voice carried that light, dismissive tone she used when she didn't want to be questioned. Nathan's jaw tightened. "He's 7. He doesn't know how to—" She cut him off, sipping her wine. "Nathan, you're too soft with him. He needs structure, discipline." The word hung in the air like frost. Discipline. Nathan didn't reply. He sat at the head of the table and stared at his plate, pushing the food around with his fork. He wasn't really hungry. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the clock ticking over the fireplace filled the silence, steady and slow. Later that night, after Vanessa had gone upstairs, Nathan found himself walking through the hallway. His hand brushed the edge of a picture frame. It used to hold a photo of his late wife smiling in the sunlight, hair caught in the wind, holding Eli as a toddler. But now, the frame was empty, replaced by an abstract painting in cold gray tones. He frowned, standing there for a long time. "When did this get changed?" he murmured to no one. The house felt heavier suddenly, as if all its walls were listening. He moved toward Eli's room. The door was slightly ajar, the small nightlight still glowing inside. The bed was perfectly made, the blanket tucked in tight, untouched. No toys scattered on the floor, no signs of a child's restlessness, only stillness. Nathan stepped closer, whispering, "Eli?" No answer. He waited, listening. The wind pressed against the windows, carrying the sound of dry leaves scraping along the porch. For a brief second, he thought he heard something else, a faint sound, distant, uncertain. He turned his head toward the staircase, heart beginning to race. Maybe it was the heater. Maybe it was the sound of the fridge motor kicking in. But no, it sounded softer, human like a whimper. Nathan froze, every sense sharpened. The noise came again, a quiet, muffled sob from downstairs. He walked back toward the staircase, slow and cautious. The house seemed to breathe with him, each step creaking under his weight, each shadow stretching across the wall. When he reached the first floor, the sound grew clearer. It came from the kitchen. A tiny, broken sound, like someone crying in their sleep. Nathan hesitated at the doorway, the pale refrigerator light spilling across the tile floor. The air was colder here, biting at his skin. He whispered, "Eli?" No response, only that same faint sound again. He stepped into the kitchen, and the faint glow of the refrigerator spilled across the tile. At first, the room looked empty. Then he saw a small bundle on the floor. It was Eli. The boy was curled up, wrapped in a thin blanket, holding a crust of bread. Nathan knelt, voice trembling. "Buddy, what are you doing here?" Eli blinked, barely awake. She said I can't sleep in my bed. I didn't finish dinner. For a moment, Nathan couldn't breathe. The house that had once been full of comfort now felt colder than the marble beneath him. He lifted the boy gently, feeling how light he'd become. Vanessa's voice came from behind. "Nathan, what are you doing?" "He was sleeping on the floor," he said quietly. She shrugged, tired of the drama. "He needs discipline." Nathan looked at her, then back at the child in his arms. "No," he said softly. "He needs love." He carried Eli upstairs, wrapped him in a warm blanket, and sat beside him until his breathing steadied. For a long time, Nathan didn't move. He only whispered, "No more cold floors," and watched as the boy drifted into sleep. Downstairs, the clock ticked toward midnight. The silence no longer felt empty, only heavy with promise. By the time the first light of dawn touched the windows, Nathan had drifted into an uneasy sleep in the chair beside his son's bed. The night had left a strange stillness in the house, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. A soft knock came from downstairs, followed by the faint hum of the coffee machine. Vanessa was already awake. When Nathan stepped into the kitchen, she stood by the counter in her robe, scrolling through her phone. The air smelled like bitter espresso and something colder distance. "You look terrible," she said flatly. "Rough night?" Nathan didn't answer. His eyes went to the floor where Eli had slept. The blanket was still there, folded neatly, a small dent pressed into the tile where the boy's body had been. He picked it up, silent. Vanessa sighed, annoyed. "Nathan, please don't start another lecture. I told you he needs structure. He's been acting out, and I'm not his nanny." He turned, his voice calm but low. "He's a child, Vanessa, not a problem to fix." She raised an eyebrow, took a sip of her coffee. "Well, maybe you should have been around to teach him that." The words hit harder than she meant them to. Nathan's jaw tightened. He left without another word, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. Eli was still asleep, his breathing shallow. Nathan touched his forehead. It felt too warm. Panic flared inside him. "Eli! Hey, buddy, wake up." No response. The boy's lips parted slightly, his skin pale and damp. Nathan called his name again, louder this time. Nothing. He lifted him, heart racing, and felt how limp he was. "Vanessa!" he shouted. His voice echoed down the hall. She appeared at the doorway, startled. "What is it?" "He's burning up. Call an ambulance." For the first time, her mask of control cracked. She dropped her phone and ran to grab her coat. Minutes blurred into the sound of sirens, flashing red against the white walls of the house. Nathan sat in the ambulance, Eli's hand small and cold in his. The medic worked quietly, pressing a mask over the boy's face. "Is he going to be okay?" Nathan asked, voice shaking. "His vitals are low," the medic said. "We'll do everything we can." Nathan looked out through the back window as the house disappeared behind them. The mansion stood still, perfect, and empty, like a cage pretending to be a home. He held Eli's hand tighter. "I'm here, son," he whispered, more to himself than to the boy. "I should have been here sooner." The city lights of Columbus appeared ahead, pale in the early morning fog. Somewhere between fear and guilt, something inside Nathan shifted. It wasn't just about saving his son anymore, it was about facing what he'd become. The ambulance doors swung open under the gray morning sky. Nurses were already waiting, calling out numbers and instructions as Nathan followed, clutching Eli's small backpack in one hand. The cold air stung his face. Inside the emergency room, everything moved in rhythm beeping monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the shuffle of shoes against linoleum. Nathan stood frozen near the doorway, watching doctors move around his son. A nurse finally turned to him. "Sir, you'll have to wait outside for a few minutes." He nodded numbly, stepping back. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and rain. He leaned against the wall, running a hand over his face. For a moment, he just listened to the hum of machines, to distant voices, to the pounding of his own guilt. He had spent years building towers of glass and steel, but he couldn't hold together the small world that truly mattered. Vanessa sat a few seats away in the waiting area, scrolling through her phone again. Her expression was unreadable. "You don't have to make this dramatic," she murmured without looking up. "Kids get sick." Nathan stared at her, disbelief turning into quiet anger. "Sick? His voice came out low. He was sleeping on a kitchen floor. She crossed her legs, as if shielding herself from his words. If you think this is my fault, you're mistaken. I've done everything for that child while you were too busy. He cut her off, his tone steady but sharp. Stop. For once, she did. Nathan looked toward the ER doors again.
This isn't about blame. It's about what I didn't do. What I should have seen.
The doors opened, and a doctor in green scrubs approached them. Mr. and Mrs. Cole? Nathan stepped forward immediately. How is he? The doctor's voice was calm, professional. He's stable for now, but he's severely undernourished and dehydrated. This didn't happen overnight. We'll need to keep him for observation. Nathan felt the floor tilt beneath him. Undernourished? He almost couldn't say the word. The doctor nodded. We've notified a social worker. It's standard procedure in cases like this. Behind him, Vanessa inhaled sharply. You can't be serious. This is ridiculous. But Nathan didn't argue. He just stood there, staring through the small window into Eli's room. The boy looked so small against the white sheets, tubes running from his arms. When the social worker arrived, she introduced herself softly. Helen Brooks, she said, offering her hand. I'll be reviewing Eli's case. Nathan shook it, his grip unsteady. Please, just help him. Help us. Helen nodded, her expression kind but firm. That depends on you, Mr. Cole. If you want to keep him safe, you'll have to show the court you can be there, not just provide, but be present. He swallowed hard. I will. As Helen walked away to begin her notes, Nathan lingered by the glass, watching Eli breathe under the hum of machines. The boy's small hand twitched, as if reaching for something in a dream. Nathan pressed his palm to the window, whispering to no one in particular. You're not alone anymore, son. I promise. Outside, the rain had stopped. A faint, fragile light began to rise over Columbus, the kind that came after a long, cold night, carrying just enough warmth to make a man believe he might change. Rain still streaked the windows of Riverside Methodist Hospital when Nathan returned the next morning. The storm had passed, but the sky outside remained gray, a kind of quiet gray that seemed to seep into everything, even the heart. Eli lay sleeping under thin hospital blankets, his small chest rising and falling beneath the hum of machines. Nathan sat beside him, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the IV line running to his son's wrist. It was strange how something so small, a clear plastic tube, could carry both life and guilt at once. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. A man in his 50s, dressed in light blue scrubs, stepped in. Mr. Cole, the man said. I'm Dr. Tanner. I've been overseeing your son's care. Nathan rose quickly. Is he gonna be okay? Dr. Tanner nodded slowly. He's stable, but malnourished, dehydrated. This has been going on for weeks. The words struck like a hammer, each one heavier than the last. Nathan's gaze fell to the floor. Weeks? He whispered. I didn't know. I understand, the doctor said kindly. But child neglect cases are serious. We've already reported it to the state. A social worker will be here soon. Nathan looked at the doctor, a quiet panic in his eyes. You think I did this? Dr. Tanner's expression softened. The system doesn't assume it investigates. Just be honest when the social worker arrives. When the doctor left, Nathan sank back into the chair. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence. His reflection in the window looked like someone he didn't recognize, older, smaller somehow. He ran a hand through his hair, whispering, I should have been there. Moments later, a woman entered, late 30s, composed, carrying a folder. Her voice was calm but direct. Mr. Cole, I'm Helen Brooks from Franklin County Family Services. Nathan stood, offering a handshake that trembled slightly. Thank you for coming. Helen sat, flipping open the folder. I know this is difficult. I'm here to evaluate your son's living conditions and your involvement. He nodded. Ask me anything. She glanced toward the sleeping boy.
Was he often left with your wife?
Nathan hesitated. Yes, I travel for work, but I never imagined. His voice trailed off. Helen closed her folder gently. Mr. Cole, this isn't about imagination. It's about awareness. Children remember who shows up. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it cut through him like truth always does. Nathan lowered his gaze. I failed him. Helen's expression softened slightly. You can't change the past, but you can decide who you'll be when he wakes up. For the first time since the ambulance, Nathan felt something different, not fear, but clarity. The kind that came after a storm when the air feels sharp and new. He looked at Eli again. The boy's fingers twitched slightly, like they were reaching for something. Nathan leaned closer, whispering, "I'm right here, buddy. I'm not leaving again." Empful. Outside the window, a nurse rolled a cart down the hallway, humming softly under her breath, the kind of ordinary sound that made the world feel alive again. Nathan sat back, breathing deeply. The pain was still there, but it was joined by something else, a resolve that hadn't existed the night before. A few hours later, the room had grown quiet again. The morning light shifted through the blinds, laying soft stripes of gold across the hospital floor. Nathan sat in silence, watching the patterns move slowly with the Sunday. Vanessa arrived just after 10. She wore dark glasses and carried her handbag as though she were walking into a business meeting. "How's the boy?" she asked, voice smooth, distant. Nathan looked at her for a long moment before answering. "He's your son too, Vanessa." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Of course. I just meant how bad is it?" Helen Brooks, the social worker, happened to step back into the room right then. "It's serious," she said calmly, closing the door behind her. "Eli's condition didn't appear overnight. Someone in that house neglected him for quite some time." Vanessa's smile faltered. "Are you implying something?" Helen's tone stayed steady. "I don't imply. I observe." Nathan watched them both, his hands tightening on his knees. He could feel the heat building inside him, the frustration of years spent pretending everything was fine. "This isn't about saving face, Vanessa. It's about saving him." Vanessa looked away, her silence louder than any defense. Helen turned toward Nathan. "We'll need to assess both of you. Your home, your schedules, how you plan to care for Eli once he's discharged." Nathan nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." Helen studied him for a moment. "Good, because if you want to keep him safe, you can't just say you'll be there, you have to be there." Her words stayed with him long after she left. That night, the hospital grew dim. The sound of footsteps faded from the hallway, leaving only the steady rhythm of Eli's breathing and the soft hum of the machines. Nathan sat in the dark beside the bed, the small plastic chair creaking under his weight. He thought of all the nights he'd missed school plays, bedtime stories, the sound of laughter over dinner. He thought of how easy it had been to fill silence with work, how simple it was to convince himself that providing was the same as loving. He reached for Eli's hand, holding it gently in his own. "You're stronger than me, kid," he whispered. "But I'm learning." The boy stirred faintly, eyes still closed, and murmured something Nathan couldn't quite hear. It sounded like a dream, soft, innocent, forgiving. Nathan leaned closer, his voice breaking slightly. "You don't have to forgive me yet. Just let me earn it." He stayed there until dawn, watching as the sky over Columbus began to brighten. The first faint colors of morning stretched across the horizon, touching the hospital walls with pale gold. For the first time in years, Nathan didn't feel like running from the light. By the time the weekend came, the city had started to thaw. The ice on the sidewalks cracked under the morning sun, and a soft mist hung over the streets of downtown Columbus. Nathan walked quickly through the revolving doors of a tall glass building, the office of Marianne Torres and Associates, family law specialists. He wasn't used to coming here for anything personal. His name usually appeared on contracts and boardrooms, not case files stamped family court. Yet this time, the stakes were nothing like business. The receptionist smiled politely. "Mr. Cole, Miss Torres will see you now." He nodded, smoothing his coat before stepping inside. Marianne Torres was a woman in her 40s, sharp eyes and calm voice, the kind of presence that filled a room without raising volume. She stood to greet him. "Mr. Cole, I read the report from Family Services. Please, sit." Nathan took the chair opposite her desk. "I need to make sure my son stays with me," he said quietly. Marianne studied him for a moment. "That will depend on evidence and your involvement from now on." The report notes neglect, possibly over several months. The state may see both parents as responsible. "See," Nathan exhaled slowly. "He was in my house, under her care. I didn't know." Marianne raised a hand gently. "And that's exactly what they'll ask. Mr. Cole. Why you didn't know. The words hung between them. Nathan's jaw tightened. She leaned forward slightly. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you protect your child. But you must understand, this isn't just a custody battle. It's about proving you've changed. Nathan looked at her, weary but determined. Then that's what I'll do. Marianne nodded. Good. I'll need documentation, medical reports, testimonies from the social worker, anyone who can confirm you're taking responsibility. And I'd suggest hiring a private investigator. If your wife, she paused deliberately, if Vanessa has anything to hide, it's best we know before the court does. Nathan frowned. An investigator? She handed him a card. Maurice Vega. Discreet. Experienced. Ex-police. He works fast. He pocketed the card, the name already burning into his mind. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the blinds. Marianne finally broke the silence. One more thing, Mr. Cole. Don't speak to the media, and don't confront your wife. Let the truth do that work for you. Nathan nodded, his voice low. Truth is all I've got left. Marianne's expression softened. Sometimes, that's enough. When he stepped back out into the cold, the city felt quieter than usual. He paused by his car, watching people hurry down the street. Families, couples, a mother holding a child's hand. He whispered to himself, it's time to fight for something real. He didn't mean a courtroom victory. He meant redemption. That evening, the air carried the smell of melting snow and gasoline, a typical Ohio winter night. Nathan drove past the half-empty diners, the flicker of neon signs reflecting off the wet pavement. He pulled into a small parking lot near the river, the address printed on Marianne's card glowing faintly under the dashboard light. Maurice Vega, Private Investigations. The building was an old two-story brick structure squeezed between a laundromat and a pawn shop. A single lamp glowed in the upstairs window. Nathan climbed the creaking stairs and knocked twice. The man who opened the door looked like he'd been part of the city longer than the streets themselves. Gray hair, thick sweater, and eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. You must be Mr. Cole, he said, his voice gravelly but steady. Marianne called ahead. Come in. Nathan stepped into the office. It smelled faintly of coffee and paper. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and framed certificates. I used to be with the state police, Vega said, settling behind his desk. Now I work for people who don't trust what they see. Nathan nodded. I need to know what happened in my house, what my wife did while I was gone. Vega leaned back, studying him. You think she hurt the kid? I know she did, Nathan answered softly. I just need proof. Vega scratched something into a notepad. You'll get it. But you should understand, truth's a heavy thing. Once you find it, you can't put it back. Nathan met his gaze. I've carried worse. The old detective gave a slow nod. Then let's begin. He slid a folder across the desk. I'll start by checking your household staff, anyone who quit or got fired recently. I'll also need access to your home. Can you still get in? I own the property, Nathan said. I can. Good, Vega replied. We'll install a few discrete cameras. Motion. Triggered. Nothing illegal, just insurance. Nathan hesitated. I don't want revenge. I just want to make sure my son's safe. Then we're on the same side. As they finalized the plan, the city lights flickered through the window, cold and distant. When Nathan finally stepped back outside, the night felt heavier. He paused by his car, watching his breath fog in the cold. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about meetings or stock prices. He was thinking about the sound of his son's laughter, a sound he hadn't heard in far too long. He looked up at the sky, a faint glow of stars above the city haze, and whispered, We're getting our life back, kid. Inside the glove compartment, Marianne's other papers sat folded neatly, custody forms, affidavits, dates. But the real battle, Nathan knew, wasn't written on any page. It was inside him, between guilt and resolve, between who he had been and who he was trying to become. When he started the engine, the radio came alive softly with an old country song, the kind his father used to play when he was a boy. Nathan let it play, letting the sound of it carry him home. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, he was ready to face it. 3 days later, the snow had melted into muddy slush that lined the driveways of Upper Arlington. Nathan parked his car a few houses away from his own, the place he had once called home. It looked the same from the outside: trimmed hedges, spotless windows, the porch light still working. Yet the silence around it felt different now, heavier, like the air itself remembered what had happened inside. Maurice Vega stepped out of the passenger seat, carrying a small black case. "You're sure no one's home?" "She's staying at a hotel downtown," Nathan replied quietly. "The court order says she can't return until the hearing." "Good," said Vega, adjusting his gloves. "Let's take a look." Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and disinfectant. Everything was in perfect order, too perfect. Toys stacked neatly, frames dusted, curtains drawn with precision. "She cleaned up fast," Vega muttered. "People who hide things usually do." They started in the kitchen. The tiles gleamed, but under the table, Nathan noticed a faint mark on the floor, a scuff, a stain that no cleaner had managed to erase completely. His chest tightened. "That's where he slept," he thought. "Where I found him." He crouched down, touching the cold tile with his fingertips. Vega watched silently for a moment before moving on. "I'll check the pantry." Inside, everything looked full. Imported snacks, cereal boxes, organic produce untouched. Vega took pictures, then moved to the trash bin. It was nearly empty, except for a few folded receipts. He pulled one out, squinting. "Designer store downtown. $1,000 for perfume. Same day your son was taken to the hospital." Nathan's jaw clenched. They continued through the house, the living room, the study, and finally, the child's bedroom. Eli's bed was made too neatly, the sheets crisp and smooth. Vega opened the closet. Inside, Nathan saw new clothes, expensive ones, all tags still attached. At the back of the closet, hidden behind a pile of old blankets, something caught his eye. A small teddy bear torn at the arm, stitches coming loose. He picked it up slowly. "This was his," he whispered. "Carolina gave it to him before she died." Vega nodded. That's the kind of thing they try to bury reminders of the truth. Nathan held the bear against his chest, and for a brief moment, the strong, composed man disappeared. What stood there was a father broken, grieving, but alive again in his pain. Vega took another photo, quietly. "I'll have my team pull phone records and bank statements. Something tells me your wife's been living two lives." Nathan didn't answer. His eyes wandered across the room, the pictures on the shelf, the empty toy chest, the faint smell of cleaning spray masking something darker. For the first time, he realized how long it had been since laughter filled this space. "I used to think this house was a dream," he murmured. "Now it feels like a lie with walls." Vega looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Truth has a way of echoing, Mr. Cole. You just have to listen close enough." As they stepped out, the winter wind cut through the silence. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the driveway. Nathan locked the door and pocketed the key, the last sound echoing like a quiet goodbye. In the car, Vega placed the camera in his bag. "We'll find what you need," he said. "But be ready once you know the truth. There's no going back." Nathan looked out the window, the reflection of his old home growing smaller in the rearview mirror. "I don't want to go back," he said softly. "I just want to move forward with him." The next morning, Nathan met Vega again at a diner off Route 33, the kind of small-town place that smelled of bacon, maple syrup, and black coffee. The waitress greeted them with a friendly "Morning, Han," pouring steaming cups before walking away. It was the kind of warmth Nathan hadn't felt in weeks. Vega spread a small stack of photos across the table. "I followed your wife's trail," he said quietly. "What I found isn't just neglect, it's deception." Nathan looked down at the images. Vanessa at a boutique downtown. Vanessa dining with another man, tall, silver hair, a watch worth more than most cars. Vanessa laughing, champagne glass in hand. He felt his throat tighten. "Who is he?" "Daniel Reese," Vega replied. "Investor from Chicago. Married. She's been using your joint accounts to fund trips, hotels, jewelry, tens of thousands of dollars. It's been going on for months." Nathan's hands curled into fists around the photos. For a moment, he said nothing. The sound of a fork clinking on a plate, somewhere behind him, felt louder than it should have. "I left my son with her," he whispered finally. "I thought she was taking care of him while I worked." Vega nodded slowly. She was taking care of herself. Nathan's chest burned a mix of anger, shame, and grief. How do people live like that? How do they smile and hide everything? Vega took a sip of coffee. Some people build masks so good, they forget what's underneath. But masks always crack. He slid another paper forward. A printed bank record. This is her latest withdrawal, 2 days before your son was hospitalized. It went to a private spa in Scottsdale. Nathan shook his head, disbelief turning to bitter laughter. A spa, while my boy was starving. Vega's eyes softened, though his tone stayed measured. Mr. Cole, you've got enough here to win full custody and to make sure she answers for what she's done. But you should think about what you want this to mean for you. Revenge is easy. Redemption's harder. Nathan looked at him, weary but resolute. I don't want revenge. I just want my son to have peace and to know his father didn't stay silent. Vega nodded, the faintest smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. Then we're almost there. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the clatter of plates, the low hum of conversation. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, gentle this time, the kind that seemed to hush the world. When they stepped out of the diner, the air was cold but clear. Nathan pulled his coat tight, staring at the sky. You ever notice, he said quietly, how some storms make the air cleaner afterward? Vega smiled faintly. Yeah, that's what truth does too. Nathan watched the snow fall across the parking lot, each flake melting as it touched the ground. Somewhere deep inside, he felt something steady, not relief, not victory, but the fragile beginning of peace. He turned to Vega. Let's bring this to Marianne. It's time to end this. As they walked toward the car, Nathan thought of Eli, his son's small hand wrapped around his finger at the hospital, the slow rhythm of his breathing. The boy didn't need a perfect father. He needed a present one. And that, Nathan decided, was exactly who he was going to be. The morning of the hearing came cold and gray. Frost clung to the courthouse steps, glinting faintly under the pale Sunday. Nathan adjusted his tie in the reflection of the car window before stepping out. He hadn't slept much, not from fear, but from a restless kind of determination that refused to let him rest. Inside, the Franklin County Courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and paper, that blend of bureaucracy and human hope. Reporters lingered near the doors, their cameras slung low, waiting for a story. Nathan ignored them and walked straight ahead, holding a thin folder under his arm. Marianne Torres was already waiting by the security line, calm and focused as always. Morning, Nathan, she said quietly. You ready? He gave a small nod. As ready as I'll ever be, she offered a reassuring smile. You did the hard part already. You faced yourself. Now let's face them. They entered the courtroom. The benches creaked softly under the weight of people whispering. Vanessa sat at the opposite table, perfectly composed, her lawyer beside her, the same smug man who had built a reputation defending the indefensible. When she caught Nathan's eye, she smiled that same polished, social smile she used at galas. But this time, he didn't look away. The judge, a man in his 60s with clear eyes and a patient voice, called the room to order. Case number 22-4571, Cole versus Cole, custody and welfare hearing for minor Eli Cole. Marianne rose. Your Honor, we are ready to proceed. The other lawyer followed. As are we, Your Honor. Nathan sat still, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as the hearing began. The legal talk rolled on motions, exhibits, statements, each word another step in a long climb. He wasn't a man used to silence, but here, silence felt like strength. Marianne called the first witness Dr. Tanner. The doctor's voice was steady, clinical, compassionate. He spoke of malnutrition, dehydration, and the signs of prolonged neglect. Each detail landed like a stone in the room's quiet. When Vanessa's lawyer cross-examined, his tone dripped with indignation. Doctor, couldn't these symptoms be caused by an eating disorder? Or anxiety, perhaps? Dr. Tanner didn't flinch. No, the child wasn't refusing food. He wasn't given food. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa's lawyer sat down quickly. Marianne presented the next evidence, photos, receipts, and bank statements that Vega had gathered. As she spoke, her voice remained calm, never rising, never faltering. She didn't need drama. The truth was powerful enough. Nathan watched as the pieces of his old life, once hidden behind luxury and convenience, were laid bare for everyone to see. And though the shame stung, he didn't shrink from it. For the first time, he understood that telling the truth wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about rebuilding what was left of himself. Halfway through the session, the judge called for a short recess. Nathan stepped into the hallway, taking a deep breath. Through the tall windows, he could see the city stretching out gray rooftops, bare trees, a pale winter sky. Marianne joined him, sipping from a paper cup of coffee. "You're doing well," she said quietly. "You're steady. That matters." He nodded. "I keep thinking of Eli. Every word I say in there, it's for him." Marianne smiled faintly. "That's how fathers speak when they finally understand love." Nathan looked down at the coffee in her hand, steam rising slowly. "Funny thing," he said softly. "I used to think love was about giving everything you could. Now I think it's about showing up even when it's hard." She nodded. "That's the difference between a provider and a parent." The bailiff's voice echoed down the hall. "Court back in session." Nathan straightened his tie, his heartbeat calm. The time for silence was over. The light inside the courtroom had shifted by the time the second half of the hearing began. Afternoon sun poured through the high windows, painting long golden streaks across the oak benches and the worn marble floor. It was the kind of light that softened even the hardest faces, even those who had come to judge. Nathan sat at the plaintiff's table, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. His pulse matched the rhythmic creak of the ceiling fan. Across from him, Vanessa whispered something to her attorney, her manicured fingers tapping against the table like a metronome for impatience. Judge Fairmont adjusted his glasses, his voice calm but resonant. "We'll resume proceedings in the custody hearing for minor child, Eli Cole. Miss Torres, you may call your next witness." M. Marianne stood, her calm presence steadying the room. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Nathan Cole to the stand." A murmur rippled through the gallery as Nathan rose. He straightened his tie, the same navy one he'd worn to Eli's first school performance years ago, and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff held out the Bible. Nathan placed his hand upon it and swore to tell the truth. As he sat down, Marianne's tone was gentle. "Mr. Cole, can you describe to the court what you saw the night your son was taken to the hospital?" Nathan's voice came out low, almost a whisper. "I found him asleep on the kitchen floor. He was cold. He hadn't eaten. When I asked why, he said his mother told him he didn't deserve dinner." A collective hush fell over the courtroom. The judge's pen paused midair. Marianne gave him a moment, then continued. "How did that make you feel, Mr. Cole?" Nathan swallowed hard. "Like I'd failed the only person who ever truly needed me. I'd been working, traveling, chasing success. I thought providing was enough. But when I lifted him off that floor, I realized I'd built everything except the one thing that mattered to home." A quiet sniffle broke from somewhere in the gallery. Even the court reporter paused to dab her eyes before continuing. Vanessa's attorney stood ready to pounce. "Mr. Cole," he said sharply, "you admit you were absent. You admit you failed to notice signs of neglect for weeks. Isn't this sudden devotion a little too convenient now that your marriage has fallen apart?" Nathan didn't flinch. "You're right," he said calmly. "I was blind. But blindness isn't indifference. I was lost in the noise of ambition until I heard the silence of my child's hunger. That silence changed me. You don't fix a mistake by pretending it didn't happen. You fix it by never making it again." The lawyer hesitated, words dying in his throat. He sat down. Marianne nodded slightly, her expression unreadable, but proud. "No further questions." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Cole," he said quietly, "what do you want this court to understand about you?" Nathan looked around the room at the judge, at the lawyers, at the strangers who had come to witness the unraveling of his private life. Finally, his gaze settled on the photograph of Eli that Marianne had placed before him earlier. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that I'm not here to win. I'm here to show my son that love can start again, even after we break it. I can't change what I missed, but I can promise I'll never miss another moment." The judge's eyes softened. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. You may step down." When Nathan returned to his seat, Marianne touched his shoulder briefly, a quiet gesture that said, You've done enough." Then it was Vanessa's turn. She took the stand with the grace of someone who had long practiced control. Her lawyer guided her gently. "Mrs. Cole, how would you describe your relationship with your son?" Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, her voice faltered. I tried. But Nathan was always gone. I felt alone. And Eli, he was difficult sometimes. Did you ever harm or neglect your child? Her eyes darted toward the judge. No, I may have been strict, but I only wanted discipline. Marianne rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Cole, could you explain this receipt dated 2 days before Eli's hospitalization, a charge for a luxury spa in Scottsdale, Arizona?" The color drained from Vanessa's face. That was a work trip." Marianne held up a second paper. "The same date, your son was seen at school without lunch. His teacher reported signs of exhaustion. Would you like to revise your statement?" The courtroom went still. Vanessa looked down, tears threatening to undo the walls she'd spent years building. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "But I didn't mean to hurt him." "No one ever means to," Marianne said gently. "But intention doesn't erase consequence." When the testimony ended, the judge called for closing remarks. Marianne rose again, her voice measured, compassionate. "Your Honor, this case isn't about punishment. It's about protection. It's about a man who learned that love is not about what we provide, but about who we become for those who depend on us. The law can only do so much. The rest belongs to the heart." She sat down. The judge took a long breath before speaking. "This court finds in favor of Mr. Nathan Cole. Full custody is granted, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Cole pending review." Vanessa closed her eyes. Marianne reached over to steady Nathan's arm as he exhaled, the tension finally breaking. The gavel came down, one clean sound that felt like both an ending and a beginning. Outside, the sky had turned to gold. The courthouse steps glowed under the soft light of sunset. Nathan stood there for a long while, breathing in the cold air, the sounds of city life humming around him, traffic, laughter, the rustle of paper in the wind. Ordinary things, suddenly extraordinary. He took out his phone and looked at the picture on his lock screen. Eli asleep, hand curled around his teddy bear. He whispered, "We did it, buddy. We're going home." Marianne joined him at the top of the steps. "You ready?" He nodded. More than ever. As they walked toward the parking lot, the world seemed brighter, calmer. The same streets, but different eyes. Nathan realized that redemption wasn't something granted by a judge. It was something you earned, one promise at a time. And that day, under the fading Ohio sky, a father kept his first. The hospital smelled of lemon disinfectant and hope. That was the strange thing about healing. It always started with something sterile, then slowly filled with warmth again. Nathan walked down the familiar hallway, his steps lighter than they'd been in months. Nurses nodded as he passed, recognizing the quiet man who had spent nights sitting by his son's bed, whispering stories only the two of them could hear. When he reached room 212, the door was open. Eli was awake, sitting up, drawing with a box of crayons the nurse had given him. His hair was messy, his small fingers smudged with color. When he looked up and saw Nathan, his eyes widened. "Dad," he said softly, almost as if testing whether the words still belonged to him. Nathan smiled and sat on the edge of the bed. "Hey, buddy, you're looking stronger." Eli nodded. "Miss Helen said I can go home soon." Nathan's chest tightened. "Yeah," he whispered. "We're going home. Just you and me." Eli tilted his head. "Is Mom coming too?" The question landed gently, but it carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Nathan paused, choosing his words carefully. "She won't be living with us for a while, but she still cares about you. And I'll make sure you never have to worry again, okay?" Eli looked down at his drawing, a stick figure man holding a smaller hand under a big sundae. "Can we have pancakes again?" he asked after a moment. Nathan laughed softly, blinking back tears. "Every Sunday, that's a promise." Helen Brooks stepped into the doorway, smiling quietly. "He's doing great," she said. "The doctor says he can be discharged tomorrow. You've done everything right, Mr. Cole." Nathan shook his head slightly. "I just showed up. That's all he ever needed." Helen's voice softened. "That's more than most people ever do." After she left, Nathan turned back to his son. You remember the tree by the backyard fence? The big one with the swing? Yeah, Nathan said. When we get home, we'll fix that swing. Maybe plant another tree too. Something that'll grow right along with us. Eli grinned. Can I name it? Of course. The boy thought for a second, eyes bright. Hope. That's what I'll call it. Nathan smiled, not the polite kind he used in business meetings, but the real kind. The kind that started deep inside and rose slowly, like morning light. That's a perfect name, son. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Eli's forehead, feeling the warmth of his skin alive. Steady. Safe. The sun filtered through the blinds, touching the white sheets with a soft glow. The faint hum of the machines faded into the background, replaced by the rhythm of two hearts finally beating in the same direction. Nathan whispered, almost to himself, no more cold floors, no more empty rooms. Just home. Eli leaned against him, small and light, but solid the weight that grounded him to the world again. Outside, the sound of children laughing echoed from the garden below, mixing with the wind that carried the scent of pine and winter rain. It felt like forgiveness. The morning broke pale and quiet over Columbus, the kind of spring day when the world still felt half asleep. The city streets shimmered with leftover rain, and thin threads of sunlight stretched across the parking lot of Riverside Hospital. Nathan parked his car under a maple tree just beginning to bud. For the first time in months, he didn't feel weighed down by dread. Instead, there was a steady hum inside him, something like peace, though not quite. Maybe it was gratitude. Maybe it was the fragile beginning of hope. He bought breakfast from the cafeteria downstairs, pancakes, 2 oranges, and a little carton of milk. When he stepped into Eli's room, the boy was sitting by the window, drawing again. This time, it was a house under a bright yellow sun, 2 stick figures standing side by side. Hey, champ, Nathan said softly. Guess what I brought? Eli's eye lit up. Pancakes? Nathan grinned. You got it. They ate together, syrup dripping onto napkins, the hospital room filling with the smell of warmth and sugar. Nathan watched his son's small hands carefully cut each bite, the way he hummed under his breath when he was happy, things he hadn't noticed in years. Between bites, Eli asked, Can we go home today? Yeah, buddy, Nathan said. The doctor signed the papers this morning. Eli's face brightened. So, we're going home? You and me? Nathan nodded slowly. You and me. For a moment, the boy hesitated. What about Mom? Nathan's chest tightened, but he answered gently. Mom's going to live somewhere else for a while. She needs time to figure some things out, but you'll still see her when it's safe, okay? Eli nodded, his voice small. Okay. A soft knock interrupted them. Helen Brooks stepped in, holding a clipboard and her warm, steady smile. Morning, gentlemen, she said. Ready for discharge? Eli bounced on the bed. I'm all packed. Nathan laughed. He's more prepared than I am. Helen handed Nathan the paperwork. You've done well, Mr. Cole. You've been here every day, every checkup. That matters more than you think. Nathan looked down at the forms, then back at her. You were right, Helen. Children remember who shows up. Her smile softened. So do fathers. After she left, Nathan helped Eli change into his little winter coat. It was a bit small, but it would do for one more season. He tied the scarf snugly around his son's neck. Ready? Eli nodded. Let's go home. They walked through the hallway together, past nurses who waved, past the gift shop where a radio played old country songs. The elevator ride was silent, except for the faint hum of the descending floors. When the doors opened, the world outside looked brighter than Nathan remembered. Eli squinted against the sunlight, clutching his teddy bear. It's really warm, he said. That's spring for you, Nathan replied. Everything gets a second chance. They stepped into the car, and for a while, neither spoke. The hum of the engine and the rhythm of passing streets became a kind of lullaby. Nathan glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, the small face pressed against the window, eyes tracing the clouds. When they reached the house, the old porch creaked under Nathan's boots. He paused before unlocking the door. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something older memory, perhaps. Inside, the air was still. Dust floated through beams of sunlight like slow-moving snow. Nathan opened the curtains, letting the light flood in. The shadows retreated, one by one. Eli wandered around the living room, touching the furniture as if greeting old friends. "It feels different," he said. "Maybe because it's ours now," Nathan replied. "Truly ours." Ugh. They carried a small potted sapling out to the backyard, the same one Nathan had bought from the nursery last week. The tag read, "Red maple, resilient, adaptable." Eli's eyes widened. "Are we planting it?" Nathan nodded. "We are. What should we name it?" Eli thought for a long moment, brow furrowed. Then he smiled. "Hope." Nathan's throat tightened. "That's perfect." Together, they dug a small hole under the morning sunday. The soil was damp, cool, alive. Nathan guided Eli's hands as they pressed the roots into the ground. The boy laughed when a bit of dirt splashed onto his shoes. "Messy work, huh?" Nathan teased. Eli shrugged. "Good things are messy." Nathan chuckled softly. "Yeah, they are." When they finished, they stood back to look at it, a small tree, thin and fragile, but standing. The wind brushed through the branches, making them sway gently. Nathan placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Every time you look at this tree, I want you to remember something." "What?" "No matter how small something starts, if you care for it, water it, give it light, it'll grow strong. That's true for trees and for people." Eli smiled, leaning against him. "Then I'll take care of you, too." Nathan laughed, the sound carrying through the quiet yard. "Deal." They stayed outside until the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of gold. Birds moved between rooftops, and somewhere, the faint sound of a church bell marked the passing hour. Nathan closed his eyes, breathing in the crisp air. For the first time, home didn't feel like a building, it felt like a heartbeat. He looked down at his son, who was already tracing his name into the soil beside the little maple tree. Eli and Dad. Nathan whispered almost to himself, "No more cold floors. No more empty rooms, just warmth and light and time." The wind rustled softly through the new leaves, carrying the scent of earth and promise. The world, at last, had forgiven him. Spring came slowly to Columbus that year. The snow melted into quiet rivers that traced the edges of the sidewalks, and the air began to smell faintly of wet earth and new beginnings. Nathan stood by the kitchen window, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the backyard wake up. The sapling they'd planted 2 months earlier had already grown a few bright green leaves. Its name, Hope, still hung from a small wooden tag Eli had painted in blue. He smiled to himself. There was something sacred about mornings like this. The sound of the coffee machine, the hum of the fridge, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Ordinary things that had once gone unnoticed, now precious beyond measure. From the hallway came the patter of small feet. "Morning, Dad." Eli bounded into the kitchen, wearing mismatched socks and a grin wide enough to fill the room. His cheeks were pink from sleep. "Morning, buddy," Nathan said, ruffling his hair. "You're up early." "Oh?" "I wanted to see if Hope got taller," Eli said, pressing his nose to the glass. "It did, look." Nathan leaned beside him, smiling. "You're right. Guess we both are." Eli giggled. "I'm still taller than the tree, though." Not for long. They shared pancakes again, like they did every Sunday. The syrup dripped lazily, the sunlight warmed the table, and laughter filled the space where silence used to live. After breakfast, Nathan pulled on his jacket. "Come on," he said. "We've got some work to do." They stepped outside, the grass still damp beneath their shoes. The tree swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves glinting like small pieces of sunlight. Nathan knelt, loosening the soil around the roots, while Eli watered it carefully from a small metal can. "When it gets big," Eli asked, "can we build another swing?" Nathan looked up at the boy's bright face and nodded. "Yeah, a swing for both of us this time." For a moment, neither spoke. The air smelled of rain and promise. A church bell rang faintly somewhere in the distance, steady, comforting, like the heartbeat of a town that still believed in second chances. Nathan sat back on his heels, wiping dirt from his hands. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think trees grew because of sunlight and water, but I think it's more than that." Eli tilted his head. "What else do they need?" He smiled gently. "People who care enough to stay." The boy's eyes shone with quiet understanding. They stood side by side, watching the small tree tremble under the wind, fragile, but alive. And Nathan realized that the same could be said for them. The years rolled by softly, as they tend to do when life finally finds its rhythm again. The house on Maple Street had grown older with them. The paint on the porch faded to a gentle cream. The wind chimes near the window played the same old tune every afternoon. And the tree they'd planted that spring had become something beautiful. Hope stood tall now, its branches wide enough to throw shade across the yard. Every autumn, its leaves turned a deep, blazing red, the color of sunsets and second chances. The neighbors often stopped to admire it, never knowing the story it carried. Nathan had started his mornings differently these days. He'd wake before dawn, brew his coffee, and sit on the porch with an old flannel blanket draped across his shoulders. The house would be still except for the ticking clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. And from that spot, he could watch the first light touch the leaves of the tree that had once been just a sapling, fragile, uncertain, like the man who planted it. Inside, a boy's laughter echoed. Eli was older now, taller, freckled, with a voice that was beginning to sound like his father's. He was practicing guitar in the living room, strumming clumsy chords that somehow made the mornings feel alive. "Dad," he called out, "it's working. Listen." Nathan smiled, leaning against the porch rail. "Sounds like music to me, buddy." Eli grinned from the doorway, the same grin that had carried Nathan through his darkest nights. "You think Mom would like it?" There was no bitterness in his question anymore, just curiosity. Time had softened the sharp edges. Nathan took a moment before answering. "I think she would. People change, son. Some faster than others, but we all try, in our own way." Eli nodded thoughtfully, then went back inside, humming to himself. Nathan's gaze drifted to the yard. The swing beneath Hope's branches still swayed gently in the wind. He could remember every stage, the small hands that first tied the rope, the cautious pushes, the loud laughter, the nights when he'd fall asleep under the tree, with Eli curled against his chest. There were still tough days. Of course, nights when the house felt too quiet, when memories of mistakes crept in uninvited. But those moments no longer owned him. They simply reminded him how far they'd come. Later that afternoon, they decided to plant another tree beside Hope. The ground was soft from spring rain, the air cool and sweet. Nathan carried the new sapling, a slender oak, while Eli held the shovel. "Let's put it right here," the boy said, pointing to a sunny patch near the fence. Nathan nodded. "That's a good spot. It'll get plenty of light." They worked in silence for a while, the sound of soil shifting, the rustle of leaves above. When they finished, Eli stood back proudly, brushing dirt off his hands. "What should we call this one?" Nathan smiled. "You choose. You name the last one." Eli thought for a moment. "Then this one's Faith, because hope shouldn't have to stand alone." Nathan felt his throat tighten. He rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "You're growing up too fast." Eli laughed. "Trees grow faster when they're loved, right?" Nathan looked out across the yard, two trees now swaying side by side, their roots deep in the same soil. "Yeah," he said softly, "they do." Evening came slowly, wrapping the house in amber light. They sat together on the back steps, eating slices of apple pie Nathan had baked earlier. The cicadas began their song, and the smell of rain drifted from somewhere far away. "Dad," Eli said after a while, his voice quieter now, "do you ever think about that night? The one at the hospital?" Nathan set his plate down, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Every now and then, but not with sadness anymore. That night saved us both. It made me stop running from life and start living it." Eli leaned his head against his father's shoulder. "I'm glad you came back for me." Nathan smiled gently. "You came back for me first." The boy laughed softly, but Nathan could see the shimmer of tears in his eyes, not of pain, but of understanding. As dusk deepened, the stars began to flicker above the branches of Hope and Faith. The air turned cooler, the crickets louder. Nathan wrapped an arm around his son and whispered, "One day, you'll plant trees of your own. Just remember the roots matter as much as the leaves." Eli nodded, his voice barely above the wind. "I will." They sat in silence after that, listening to the world breathe. And in that quiet, that deep, gentle quiet that only comes after forgiveness, Nathan realized something simple. Redemption isn't a destination. It's a rhythm. It's in the breakfasts shared, the small kindnesses, the laughter on porches, the shade that grows because someone once cared enough to stay. The wind moved through the trees, and the branches of hope whispered softly to the young oak beside it, a song of beginnings, of roots intertwined, of life continuing. Nathan raised his mug of coffee toward the horizon one last time. To second chances, he said, and to love that lasts. And the camera of memory pulled back father and son beneath two growing trees, bathed in the gold of a fading day. No grand speeches, no applause, just peace, steady and real. And if you listened closely, you could almost hear the leaves answer back, not with words, but with a sound older than language, the sound of home. Sometimes, the quietest endings are the ones that stay with us the longest. Nathan and Eli didn't rebuild their world overnight. They did it one morning at a time, through laughter over pancakes, through shared silences beneath the growing trees, through small acts of care that slowly stitched love back into the corners of their home. In that backyard on Maple Street, where once there had been emptiness, there now stood two trees, hope and faith. And under their shade, a father learned what it truly meant to stay. It wasn't the wealth Nathan had built, or the reputation he once chased that gave his life meaning again. It was the warmth of a child's hand in his, the sound of his son's laughter echoing through a house that had once been silent. Redemption, he learned, isn't found in grand gestures, but in showing up every single day for the people who matter most. And in that daily choosing, love found its way home. Maybe that's the quiet miracle of life. That forgiveness grows best in ordinary soil and Sunday breakfasts, in bedtime stories, in the soft hum of a porch light that's left on just in case someone comes home late. Like an old lamp glowing by the window, a simple act of kindness can guide us through even the darkest roads of our journey. So if you ever find yourself thinking it's too late to make things right, remember Nathan and his son. Remember that it only takes one honest heart and one steady hand to start again. Because love, real love, doesn't ask where you've been. It only asks if you're willing to stay. And maybe tonight, as you finish your cup of tea or sit quietly watching the sunset fade beyond the trees, you'll think about your own roots, the people who watered your life with kindness and faith. Take a moment to be grateful for them, or to become that light for someone else. If this story touched your heart, press 1" the comments. If you think it could have been told differently, press 0 and tell me what you'd change, because stories, like people, grow stronger when they're shared. And if it made you remember something, a warm dinner, a child's laughter, or a promise kept long ago, hold on to that feeling. That's where home really lives.